cough into your elbow without thinking about it. It takes less than a second. You barely notice you did it. But 1400 years ago, a cough like that one crossed an ocean, entered a palace, and quietly unmade the most powerful empire on Earth. This is not a story about a battle. There were no armies at the gates, no siege engines, no burning walls. The empire did not fall to swords. It fell to something smaller than a grain of sand, carried in the stomach of a flea, riding on the back of a rat, hidden in a sack of grain. You have heard of the Black Death. Most people have. But almost no one has heard of its older, stranger sibling, the one that came 800 years earlier, the one that hit an empire at the exact moment it was on the verge of reclaiming the entire Roman world. Its name was the Plague of Justinian. And the real story is far stranger than a lot of people got sick. Picture Constantinople in the year 541. It is the capital of the Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of what used to be Rome. The streets are packed. Merchants shout over each other. Grain ships arrive constantly from Egypt with the empire's breadbasket, feeding a city of perhaps 500,000 people. The emperor's name is Justinian. He is ambitious. He wants to do something almost nobody has managed before. He wants to reunite the fractured Roman Empire west and east under a single crown. His armies have already retaken North Africa. They are pushing into Italy. Rome itself, the old capital, is back under imperial control for the first time in decades. Justinian is close. Closer than any emperor before him. History is bending in his direction. Then, in the summer of 541, ships arrive from Egypt carrying grain. And something else. Rats, fleas, and a bacterium called Yersinia pestis. Nobody in Constantinople knows what that bacterium is, of course. Germ theory will not exist for over 1,000 years. All they know is that people are getting sick, fast. A fever appears out of nowhere. Then swelling, painful lumps in the neck, armpits, and groin. Within days, sometimes hours, the person is dead. The Byzantine historian Procopius was alive in Constantinople when it happened. He wrote it down as he watched it unfold, describing scenes of mass death that overwhelmed the city's ability to bury its own people. At the outbreak's peak, contemporary accounts describe the city losing thousands of residents every single day. Ships were used to dump bodies into the sea because the cemeteries had run out of room. Does that number sound impossible? It should. Modern historians have debated it for decades, arguing the true toll, while catastrophic, may have been lower than ancient writers claimed. But even the most conservative modern estimates suggest the plague killed a substantial percentage of the empire's population within a few years. Some estimates for the empire as a whole run as high as 1 in 4 people. 1 in 4. Try to sit with that for a second. Imagine walking down your street today and knowing that by next year, a quarter of your neighbors will be gone. For a long time, some historians doubted the scale of it entirely. The numbers seemed too extreme. The ancient sources too prone to exaggeration. That changed in 2014 when a team led by paleogeneticist David Wagner extracted and sequenced ancient DNA directly from the teeth of plague victims buried in a German cemetery from that exact era. The DNA matched Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium responsible for the Black Death 8 centuries later. The plague was not exaggeration. It was real, it was bacterial, and it was everywhere. Harvard historian Michael McCormick took the evidence further. He combined ancient texts, burial records, and even tree ring data reflecting a mysterious global cooling period in the years just before the outbreak. His research paints a picture of an empire already weakened by unusual climate disruption right before the plague hit. A weakened harvest, a weakened population. Then a bacterium arrives at the worst possible moment. Here's where the story gets strange, because the plague did not just kill people, it killed momentum. Justinian's reconquest of the West depended on soldiers. Soldiers need to be paid, fed, and replaced when they die in battle. But now they were dying of something else entirely, and dying faster than any battlefield could account for. Tax revenue collapsed because there were fewer farmers to farm and fewer merchants to trade. The imperial treasury, once overflowing, began to run dry. Entire regions of the empire lost so much of their workforce that fields went unharvested. Justinian himself caught the plague. He survived, but the empire around him did not recover so easily. The reconquest of Italy, once nearly complete, slowed to a crawl. The wars dragged on for another 2 decades, bleeding resources the empire no longer had. By the time Justinian died in 565, much of what he had reclaimed was already slipping away again. Within a few years of his death, a new Germanic group called the Lombards swept into Italy and carved out their own kingdom in the very territory his soldiers had bled for. Would that have happened anyway? Plague or no plague? Historians still argue about it. That question does not have a clean answer. But the timing is difficult to ignore. The empire's most ambitious project in a century collided directly with its worst demographic catastrophe in a century, and it never fully recovered its former reach. There is a deeper twist buried in all of this, and it is the part most people miss. The plague did not strike randomly. It followed trade. It followed grain ships, moving along the exact routes that made Constantinople rich and powerful in the first place. The very infrastructure that built the empire, its ports, its markets, its constant flow of goods and people, was the same infrastructure that let a bacterium travel 1,000 miles in the belly of a rat and arrive at the emperor's front door. Historian Lester Little, who edited one of the major modern academic collections on this outbreak, argued something important. He argued that pandemics are never separate from history. They are woven into it. They follow the same roads that carry wealth. They exploit the same density that builds cities. An empire's greatest strength, the ability to connect distant places quickly, is also its greatest vulnerability. Sit with that for a moment, because it does not sound like ancient history. It sounds familiar. You have lived through a version of this. Maybe not on the same scale, but the underlying pattern is one your own recent memory can recognize immediately. A virus that spread not because the modern world was primitive, but because the modern world was connected. Airports instead of grain ships, highways instead of trade roads. The same interconnectedness that lets you order something from another continent and have it arrive in 2 days is the same interconnectedness that let a new pathogen circle the globe in a matter of weeks. This is not a coincidence of history repeating itself. It is a structural truth about how large, connected societies work. The more efficiently a civilization moves people and goods, the more efficiently it can also move disease. Every empire, ancient or modern, makes an unspoken trade, connection for growth, and vulnerability as the price. Justinian never chose that trade consciously. No emperor does. Nobody sits down and decides, I will build a magnificent trading empire, and in exchange, I will accept the risk that a bacterium hitching a ride on a grain ship might unravel 2 decades of ambition. But that is exactly the deal every interconnected civilization makes, whether it realizes it or not. You make that same deal today every time you get on a plane, every time you order a package shipped from across the world, every time you walk into a crowded building full of strangers breathing the same air. Most days nothing happens. The infrastructure just works. Goods move, people move, life continues. But the same channels that make modern life fast and convenient are the same channels a pathogen would use if it wanted to travel as far and as fast as possible. Justinian's empire never disappeared overnight. That is important to understand. It limped forward for centuries afterward, in a smaller, more fragile form. The plague did not erase Byzantium. It simply took the wind out of its most ambitious sails at the exact moment those sails were finally full. History rarely ends with a dramatic final battle. More often, it ends with a slow leak nobody notices until the ship has already lost its course. So the next time you cough into your elbow, or wash your hands without a second thought, or feel a strange sense of unease walking through a crowded terminal, you are responding to something older than modern medicine. You are responding to the same underlying pattern an emperor in Constantinople never got the chance to fully understand. You cough into your elbow without thinking about it, but somewhere in that small automatic gesture is the ghost of an empire that once did not know to do the same thing and paid a price no army could have prevented.